Hello everyone and welcome back to more of the Labyrinth of Grisaia. In the last episode, a bear got into the cabin. We tried to fight the bear off, but we hesitated. We couldn't kill the bear. And so he hurt our dog, and he grabbed the dog in its mouth and ran off with it. But we're like, no, we're going to save our dog. We're going to save our dog. So I can't just run away forever. That won't solve anything. I've got to kill it. Once I kill it, everything will be over. In that moment, I couldn't think about anything else. I had to follow that bear, find it, and kill it. I had to get John back. There was no room for any other thoughts in my mind. Murderous anger had consumed me. Following the trail of John's blood, I traced the bear's path through the forest. I didn't care if I died. If that bear ended up eating me, fine. But not John. Not John! I had to get her back. Using my knife as a machete, I hacked my way through the branches of overgrown hemlock trees, trying not to stumble on the bushes in my path. Whenever I lost sight of the trail, I'd spread myself flat against the ground and press one ear to the earth, trying to sense the bear's heavy footsteps. I could feel them. Yes. The animal was probably 200 kilos or more. When it moved, I could actually feel the vibrations. Imagining the forest around me as a perfectly round pond, I carefully estimated where the ripples I felt were coming from. This way. Turning my head and sniffing at the air, I discovered a whiff of bestial stink and a hint of iron that suggested fresh blood. Picking up my rifle and knife from the ground beside me, I quickly rose to my feet and set off towards my target. It's not far now. I'll catch up in no time. As I approached, I licked the back of my hand and held it up to the air. Realizing that I was downwind of the bear, I let a smile spread across my face. The bushes a little way ahead were shaking in an unnatural way. I'd found the enemy I was looking for. Moving silently, I began to slow my breathing. Don't want to startle the animal. This mountain was a living thing. It was breathing in its own way. I had to synchronize myself to that rhythm. If I controlled my breathing perfectly, I'd melt into the natural world. Not even a wild animal will be able to notice my presence. There he is! The bear was about 30 meters ahead of me when I finally spotted it. It was making its way up a natural slope, still holding John in its mouth. Stopping where I stood, I quietly raised my rifle. For a moment, just a moment, I regretted not installing the scope, but at this distance there was no chance I'd miss. There was a 300 Win mag in the chamber. All I had to do was carefully pull the trigger. From such close range, it would be more than enough to take the thing down. Unfortunately, I'd lost my cool at the sight of the animal. I pulled the trigger before I was actually ready, with my feet planted awkwardly on uncertain ground. As a 7.62mm bullet left the barrel, the recoil hit me hard. I slipped on the damp moss below my feet. Gunshot ringing in my ears, I tumbled painfully to the ground. Damn it! I looked up quickly to check on my target. The bear had turned around to face me. John was still dangling from its mouth. Stupid! How could you miss the shot? Mentally cursing myself, I tried to stand, only to realize that my legs were trembling. An instant later, I noticed that my heart was beating so powerfully that it felt like it was about ready to explode. I was terrified. It was the same thing I'd felt when I attacked my father and left my mother to die. A kind of terror that clings to you like glue, holding you like an insect in a trap. The gunshot had probably startled the bear, but by the time I raised my head, it was glaring down at me where I lay fallen on the ground. Allowing John to fall from its mouth, it began to shuffle slowly around, positioning itself so that I was directly in front of both of its eyes. Hidden by the gaze of a predator that had found new prey, I couldn't move so much an inch. If I tried to run now, I'd die. The thing would attack the instant I showed it my back. I couldn't give it any indication I wanted to flee. The slightest flinch could prove to be fatal. But even the movement of a drop of sweat trickling down my forehead might be enough to prompt the bear to attack. Overwhelmed by fear, I forced the air in my lungs out in a small gasp. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see John lying limply on the ground, her neck broken by the bear's jaws. I didn't feel pity or anger. Those emotions had disappeared entirely from my mind. The only thing I felt in that moment was a simple, instinctive kind of fear. If I show any weakness, any at all, I'm going to end up like that. I don't want to end it like that. It was the same as when I seen my mother's corpse. Face to face with the inevitability of death, I was paralyzed by the thought that it might be my turn next. This was just pathetic. Was I really just gonna sit here trembling? Had I not made any progress at all? All that training be for nothing? Natsuko had trained me to overcome this kind of fear. And even if I did manage to survive by just sitting here, I knew perfectly well that I'd end up hating myself for it. Not fighting back. Biting down on my lower lip until I tasted blood. I slowly stretched out my hand toward the rifle I dropped as I fell, my eyes still fixed on those of the bear. Grabbing the sling, I dragged my weapon across the ground to me. But the moment it entered my field of vision, I had to fight the urge to curse out loud. Damn it. The gun must have fallen muzzle first to the ground. The barrel was packed tightly with black soil. If I pulled the trigger, the expanding gas that usually pushes the bullets out of the muzzle would bounce off the back blockage and cause a pressure explosion inside the barrel before the dirt could be ejected. The rifle was now useless. Having realized this almost instantly, I picked up the gun and tossed it aside. The bear, perhaps having recognized that the rifle was my weapon, followed its movement with its eyes. This was my chance. Quickly pushing myself up off the ground, I grabbed the knife I'd taken from the cabin's kitchen and charged forward at the bear. Stay low to the ground. Move quick and quietly. Control your breathing. Become part of nature. Close in before they know you're coming. The bear had been distracted by the rifle, but it reacted to my approach. Still, in that brief moment, I'd bought myself 3 strides forward, and that was enough to put me at an advantage. Giving me those 3 steps was a fatal mistake. Oh man, look at that thing! Oh! I rushed through the overgrown grass, my body leaning forward, and the bear reared up, stretching out its forelegs towards me. Another half step, and my murderous hatred would collide with its savage anger. I thrust the knife I'd been cradling at my side up at my enemy's throat. But the bear evaded my attack at the last moment, pulling itself back half a step, and in the next instant, one of its massive arms lashed out and sent my weapon flying. Ugh. As the bear's harsh breathing beat against my face, its bright red mouth and sharp yellow teeth plunged toward me. It's gonna eat me. My momentum had carried me right up against the animal's massive body. Reflexively, I reached out my arms and wrapped them around its neck, managing to prevent it from biting me. But that gaping red maw was now only inches away, its foul breath and sticky saliva raining down on my face. Unable even to close my eyes, I found myself staring into the face of a terrifying death, one that I'd likely be experiencing within minutes at most. I was going to die. At this rate, the bear was going to kill me and eat me. Was I really going to die like this? A failure? Who could even protect a dog? The weak die. Was that just the rule? Would it be better just to accept it? Memories flashed rapidly through my mind. The death of my sister, the death of my father, the death of my mother, the death of the girl who'd bonded with me in the depths of hell. They'd all died because they were weak, in one way or another. Was weakness just an unconditional death sentence then? Was something that cruel and unfair the fundamental rule of our world? Maybe it was. But even so, I wanted to know the reason I'd survived. I was weak, so why was I still alive? Thoughts churned chaotically through my mind. Nothing like an answer emerged. But just as I was on the verge of giving up, I felt my chest go strangely cold. Did I survive so I could kill something else? Is killing all I've got left now? All that whining about wanting to die, and here you are, desperately searching for some excuse to live. How completely pathetic. Are you that afraid of death, Kazami Yuji? Are you that afraid of death? To stare the Reaper in the face. I couldn't suppress a snicker at my own shamelessness. It really was hilarious. What a complete joke. On the verge of bursting into laughter, I felt something melt inside my head, filling it with hot mud. This is idiotic. The world warped before my eyes. The massive bear pressing down on me suddenly looked like some cheap stuffed animal you'd see in a low-budget comedy skit. Before I knew it, I was jabbing a finger into its throat, then reaching out reflexively to grab a wooden stick lying on the ground nearby. It was only a twig, really, not even 20 centimeters in length. My mind perfectly blank, I took that tiny piece of wood and pierced one of the bear's eyes with it. Ugh. Even the sturdiest creatures has a few vulnerable points that it can't defend with layers of muscle, and the bear had left one of these weak spots, its eyeballs, completely exposed to its enemy. With a terrible throaty scream, the animal bolted off of me, the twig still lodged in its ruined eye. Freed from its oppressive weight, I slowly pushed myself up off the ground. The world was tilting around me. With staggering, unsteady steps, I made my way back to the rifle I tossed aside and picked it up. A small laugh pushed its way out of my mouth. With a few knocks against a nearby tree trunk, I dislodged the soil from the barrel of my gun. Pulling back the bolt handle, I took a bullet from my pocket and pushed it into the chamber. And then turned back to the bear, which was writhing and screaming as it desperately tried to remove the twig from its eye. End of the line. Once you're dead, you won't have to feel any more pain or fear or suffering. In a way, this is a release. With that silent thought, I pushed the muzzle of my gun right up against the bear's head. Let's just get it over with already, alright? But just as my finger was closing on the trigger, I noticed an odd rustling in the bushes behind me. Lifting my heavy head with an effort of will, I turned it towards the sound. 2 bear cubs stared back at me from the undergrowth. Even at a glance, I could see they were painfully thin, on the verge of starvation. In the instant I saw them, a small flame snapped to life at the center of my frozen heart, and everything fell into place. I see. You were planning to feed my dog to those 2, weren't you? You were going to feed your cubs. A member of my family, huh? Why? Did it have to be my dog? There's other prey around here, right? Plenty of deer and tanuki. Why did it have to be John, damn it? A wave of nausea abruptly rose inside me. Kill and eat anything you want as long as it doesn't affect me. What kind of reasoning was that? What a selfish little crap. Blah. I quickly pushed a hand to my mouth, but vomit forced its way out of the gaps between my fingers. I knew how selfish I was being. I was just pretending the world revolved around me. It doesn't. Killing this bear now wasn't going to bring John back to life. It would be pointless. A pointless act of murder. Carnivores eating other animals was completely natural. But even if that was how things work, I wasn't nearly mature enough to just accept it. Spitting out the rest of the vomit that gathered in my mouth, I steeled myself and pulled the trigger of my rifle. And the sound of a gunshot echoed like thunder through the clear blue sky. Kuskabiasko turned around in the entrance of a ransacked cabin. Considering the way the room had been turned upside down and the blood all over the floor, it was fairly clearly a bear had broken in looking for prey. I trained him better than to go down that easily. And not long after Asuka muttered those words to herself, I returned to her with my head hung low. The knife was in my right hand, my rifle was on my shoulders, and in my left hand, I carried the red collar John had worn around her neck. With slow, trudging footsteps, I made my way back into the cabin. I looked up in response to Asuko's question, but I found myself unable to answer it. If I opened my mouth, I was afraid I'd just start wailing incoherently.
熊か?
With a slight nod, I finally managed to force my lips apart. Asako. In the end, I couldn't kill it. I couldn't. I'm useless. I'm so useless, Asako. I forced out the words through trembling lips. My breathing ragged, and Asako reached out to wrap her arms powerfully around me. Aww.
それでいい。お前はそれでいいんだ。
Holding my head to her chest, Asako pushed her hands into my hair and mussed it roughly around. In that instant, something that had been frozen inside me abruptly thawed, and I began to cry. Regret, sadness, chagrin rushed through me all at once. It was simply unendurable. Why did this have to happen? I wailed out the question, knowing there was no real answer.
うるせえ。男がそんぐらいのことで泣くんじゃねえよ。バカ野郎。
Even as she spoke those words, I could tell that Asako was crying as well. In the shaking of her voice, I could hear an unspoken question. How much does fate have to torment this kid? That evening, Asako made a grave for John behind the cabin. She said it would help us move on. John's body wasn't actually inside it. The only thing we buried was the red collar that I'd carried back from the woods. I'd picked out that collar at a pet shop in town. Red seemed like a good color since John was a girl. The grave itself was very simple, a rough arrangement of some stones we picked up at random, resting on the earth where the collar was buried. But strangely, its presence was enough to help me regain my emotional balance. To put it another way, after a long time spent living for nothing, I'd finally found a new goal to pursue. Hey, Asako? I failed again. I couldn't protect something I loved.
そうだな。
I'm sick of being a coward. I'm sick of running away. Asako, you said I'm fine the way I am, but I don't think I can take any more of this. I want to be strong. I want to be like you, Asako. I'm not talking about physical power or knowing how to fight. I want to become a genuinely strong person. I think I owe that to her.
やめとけ。お前は優しすぎて弱すぎる。それに、長生きはできない生き方だ。それこそ後悔するぞ。
No matter how I spend the rest of my life, I'm gonna die with a lot of regrets. So in the meantime, I might as well go try to do something worthwhile. I might not be good for much, but I want to find a way to be useful to someone. If I can manage that, I think I'll be able to die with a smile on my face.
アーメンだよ。私のように生きるって言っても、決して楽な道じゃないぞ。
I'll tough it out.
覚悟だけでどうにかなる仕事じゃない。特にお前みたいに余計なことを考えちまうやつには向かない仕事だ。
Can't you just turn off your brain and do what you're told?
そりゃ、できなくはないが。
Okay, then I'll go with that.
出前のピザ頼むみてえに簡単に決めるなよ。もう少し考えたらどうだ?
The more I think, the harder it gets to actually do anything. Today made that painfully obvious. I don't want to sit around agonizing anymore.
なあ、ユージよ。お前には、オスロがかけた殺人装置としての暗示がまだかかってる。今のお前が、ぼんやりとした寝ぼけ顔のガキでいられるのは、その上から私が暗示をかけ直したからだ。私がお前の神だ。私の命令がなければ虫一匹殺せない。お前が鹿や熊を殺せなかったのも、それが原因だ。
That's just a handicap. Get rid of it, will you?
ダメだ。私がそれを必要だと認めた時だけ、特別に安全ピンを抜いてやる。
What a pain.
バカか貴様は、図に乗るな。いいか、死にかけの貴様を拾ったのはこの私だが、今の貴様を養っているのは私の給料。つまりは、国民の血税だ。貴様のようなヘタレを一人前にするために、今までいくら金を使ったと思っている。貴様が着ている服、貴様が訓練で使用する武器弾薬、貴様の心身英気を維持するための領末、 クソして流す便所の水道料金に至るまで全ては国民の血税で賄われていることを肝に銘じろ。
Right.
はいじゃない、返事はレンジャーだ。
ふわ
貴様には貴様を育てるために支払われた費用に見合う働きをするまでは勝手に死ぬことすら許可されてはいない。その昔まだこの国に軍隊があった頃、とある将校がこう言った。一人で10人の敵を倒すまで生き続けろと。だが今は時代が違う。そこで貴様は国民10人の生命を救うまで死ぬことは許されないと言いたいところだが、貴様は半人前だ。5人に負けてやる。国民5人を救うまで勝手にのたれ死にすることは許さん。分かったか。
ほう。
自分のためには引き金を引けなくても構わない。だが他人のためなら迷わず引き金を引ける男になれ。いいな。
I'll try not to kill myself in the process.